It's been a mad 24 hours of financial fun and ticketing mayhem. We're going to talk about all of that and get some breakdowns regarding Arsenal's monetary situation with a man that I always love reluctantly speaking to. It is the Arsenal Let's Talk Arsenal show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. I'm joined by Mike, who I absolutely do not reluctantly want to speak to. I always want to speak to Mike. How you doing?
You know, at some point, my self-confidence is going to take a real hit when you always just have to throw in those digs at me. Respect your elders. I'm old enough to be your dad, and I'd like some respect, please. It's good to be on.
Any respect ever.
It's been a little while, so it's good to be on. It's nice to have a purpose in life.
Yes, which is explaining what no one else understands, which is money. So we're gonna be getting to that. Don't worry, we're gonna do that in the longer second part of the show. The first part of the show, however, we're going to focus on the ticketing situation. So for those that aren't aware, we talked about it briefly in the second part of today's morning show when it was raised to me in the comment sections by a number of people suggesting that thousands of people have been wrongfully, suspended or had their accounts suspended. And so I basically set out today with the mission of trying to find out and get to the bottom of what had been going on. And thankfully, I have done to the best of my ability anyway. And I spoke to people at the club, I spoke to fans, and Arsenal actually produced a statement. You can read the full article on the football.london website on my page, but I'll read you the statement that was read out first of all. So this was one of our targeted operations aimed at stamping out ticket touting. Together with our supporters, we care deeply about this issue and we continue to take strong action against members who break our terms and conditions to buy tickets. We remind all supporters to only buy tickets through our official ticketing platform and the ticket exchange, and not by unauthorized means. Now, this topic, of course, is always a bit emotive for a lot of people because a lot of people want to go see Arsenal for obvious reasons. We're playing very, very well at the moment. It's a club that people see as, up there with as important in their lives as family is for many people as well. An incredibly passionate topic. And it often causes quite fractious conversations between people online. I've been spoken to pretty horrifically today by, sadly, some people that sadly can't accept the reality of certain situations and what that means. I absolutely empathize with people's difficulties in getting hold of tickets and that previously they got to go to a lot of games and now they're not going to as many games because of the change in how tickets are made available to supporters, which I always maintain has been done to try and give the most people the opportunity to go to games as feasibly possible. And I understand that's going to negatively affect some people and positively affect other people, which creates this divide and the frustration. However, one thing that all fans should be against is ticket touting and the activity of unauthorized bot accounts which snap up tickets faster than anyone else can get hold of them, and then they're resold illegitimately, which is what this entire situation obviously has led to. And the club have permanently banned 16 lead membership accounts, and of the 332 other suspended accounts, they have had those now reinstated. The downside of that is that those fans of the 332, which I'm led to believe were and have received tickets through one of those or more of one of those 16 permanently banned memberships, have lost the tickets, of course, that they got and any other tickets for upcoming games that they also purchased on those memberships, whether or not it was from one of those 16. If you were found to have purchased one through one of those 16, you've sadly lost the tickets for that and any upcoming games that you had managed to get on those memberships. In terms of a refund, the club haven't refunded it because, of course, tickets that you've bought through a third party can't be refunded. Now, there is further information on that I'm sure is to come. And if you've got any quarrels with that, there is a link to the Arsenal fan services, which you can find in that Football.London article that I published earlier, where you can leave any evidence. If you think you've been, if this doesn't represent you or you've been wrongfully treated in this, there is obviously that you can go through and raise your case with any evidence that you can produce. So that is all there. I'll probably leave a link to that article down in today's video description. But Mike, just to kind of get your thoughts surrounding this, obviously you saw late last night this happen. I spoke to you and you said that people you knew had been affected by this as well. And now obviously you're waking up in America to the news that those people, 332 of the people that were suspended, with the other 16 being permanently banned for being found to have been part of that touting situation. What's your takeaway from this?
Buyer beware is an expression that I think goes with this. I mean, it's been known for years, but it kind of not really given too much seriousness that if you purchase tickets from a source that's something other than the Arsenal or a season ticket holder that you know personally, and you know it's a season ticket, that you could run into trouble. Now, I'd say 99% of people who have ignored that advice and have gone and bought tickets anyway have ended up in the stadium with their seat. But times are changing now, and you can't argue against the implementation.
Maybe 99% is a bit high.
Well, I mean, in my experience, I know a lot of especially as people in the States who want to come over for games and don't have an avenue, especially as our and all supporters clubs allocations have been cut by, from used to having 40 tickets a game when times were tougher for Arsenal to having 6 to 10 tickets a game now. And people are saying, well, how am I going to get tickets? There's hospitality, and then there's third-party websites that are way too expensive, but they're living out their dream to go see a game. And the caution always is there, and the official word from the supporters club is don't do that, because you could spend all that money and show up there and your ticket's been confiscated or invalidated because it isn't a legitimately sold ticket. I'm still kind of confused a bit about some of the firsthand stories or the secondhand stories I heard from people that I know firsthand about people who legitimately purchased their tickets. But, if it is in fact all tracing back to a ticket that the club sold that was purchased illegitimately, that is the risk that you take. And it's a tough situation. There's no great answer to it unless you start running it like American clubs do, but that opens up ticket touting and extortionate pricing. Get to know season ticket holders as much as you can, network as much as you can, and know where the ticket you bought is from, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Yeah, of course. Like, the ticket exchange is in essence a very, very good idea. If a season ticket holder cannot go to a game, but they want their seat to be used so that the atmosphere is emboldened by someone taking up their space, that's what it's for. If somebody gets a ticket in the ballot and they can't go to that game, they can put it onto the ticket exchange. The idea of the ticket exchange is obviously great, but it does sadly open up the avenue for exploitation that the club are trying to tackle. And
let me ask you something though, because as I understand it, if you buy a ticket on the ticket exchange, or if you buy a ticket via a successful ballot entry, those tickets cannot be forwarded to anybody else other than your account. Season tickets can be. I
think you can as well on the ballot as well.
Okay, then that might be the part that I'm misunderstanding. I thought if you won a ticket on the ballot, the only thing that you could do with that ticket if you end up not being able to use it is to put it on the ticket exchange, but not
if you are successful in the ballot but cannot attend the game that you've been made successful for, it is my understanding that you can put that ticket onto the ticket exchange as well.
Oh, no, 100% you can put it on the ticket exchange, but you can't forward it to a friend.
Oh, I don't think so. No, I don't. Someone in the chat box might be able to tell us otherwise. I've never gone through that process. So neither of you.
I'm just trying to kind of diagnose where the illegal actions are occurring. Where are the bots occurring? Are the bots buying them off the ticket exchange the second they become available? Because if they are, how can the bot sell that on?
Well, they must be able to then, surely. If you must be able to transfer that ticket through the exchange to somebody else.
And that's the part that I'm a bit confused at. I mean, I would certainly understand if you were able to transfer tickets that were purchased on the ticket exchange or through ballots, because you could have 20 red memberships under fake names. Use a bot to just get tickets off the ballot and then resell them. But the only breakdown in that would be if those tickets are not able to be forwarded, then you physically have to like give somebody your phone and your account and all of that. And that wouldn't seem to be how third party things are done. So, there's still a lot for me to understand about it.
Of course.
And I usually get tickets through supporters clubs. So
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said about buyer beware. If you are buying, the bottom line is if you're buying a ticket off a third party, you're taking that risk. I mean, what you're doing is not legal anyway. I know that everyone is going to turn around and say, well, everyone does it. It's one of the, but everyone does a lot of things that aren't legal, right? But if you get caught.
And it's confusing because it is perfectly legal here. It's even perfectly legal to sell. I mean, as long as you're not doing it on the grounds of the actual stadium in most jurisdictions, but it is perfectly legal to own a ticket for a game and sell it for 5 times what you sold it for. If the demand for that game is there, you can do that. The government's trying to get more involved in being able to tax that as income, but it's legal. And so for Americans, especially, it's kind of hard to understand why there's a big issue, but the laws are different in the UK. The customs are different in the UK with regards to extortionate pricing on something that's meant to be a club, and who's sitting in those seats, and their connection to the club is obviously far more important with a team like Arsenal than it would be for, the Tennessee Titans NFL team, for example.
Yeah, Gunner 11 says you can transfer it. The bots are buying them off the ticket exchange. A person is on their laptop using an auto clicker, and once this ticket shows up, it's going into their basket, and they can transfer it to anyone.
So ballot tickets can't be transferred, but ticket exchange tickets can, which ultimately means that ballot tickets can be transferred.
Surely, because if you can put the ballot ticket onto the exchange, then surely that's any ticket exchange ticket can be transferred. I've said I think there's a really, from my perspective, and maybe I'm naive, but I think the easiest way to solve the problem is that obviously the photo IDing at stadiums need to be more efficient. They need to work out a way to make so that when you're going into the ground, it's done very quickly, because that's the issue at the moment, is the photo IDing is quite slow. I think they have improved it throughout the course of the season, but that needs to be something that's used. And then ultimately at the start of a season, your membership can have like 5 people, like 5 close friends or family that you can transfer that ticket to, because it's the ability to transfer it to anyone that seems to be the key issue. And that just opens up like the opportunity to move it on to whoever. So yeah, I think that is ultimately the way forward. I think the idea of the ticket exchange is great, to be able to fill the ticket if you can't go to a game, that it's on there. But transfer of tickets should only be to like 5 associated memberships per membership, in my view.
That would be an improvement. Again, there's never going to be a perfect solution.
No, of course not.
When you have the kind of emotion of people not being able to go to games that they used to, when you have loyalty as such a high level of a barometer on how people feel about ticketing. There's so many elements at play with Arsenal Football Club and English football just in general compared to what a lot of us in the rest of the world are used to. It's a tough one, but the situation is what it is, and your TGT community seems to be more upset about the fact that I'm not in the pool than they are about this whole ticket.
Yeah, they are. But I said this is a serious show, so get out the pool. Did you say the unicorn's dead? Is the unicorn gone?
The unicorn passed away. Yeah.
What? Why?
Just too many punctures. And no, they're.
Don't ask. No. I can see
not going to go into how, but
yes.
Not going to go into how, but let's just say he or she got very deflated and isn't around anymore.
Fair enough.
And I'm only here enough to watch the unicorn. Sorry, so often. So yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, so kind of just closing remark on the ticket.
I amortized the unicorn over enough time and paid in installments, and now it's gone. Sold it on.
Well, there you go. Well, hopefully it's still, you're still working within profit and unicorn regulations. But yeah, just a closing statement on the tickets is just advice to those is twofold. For those that still plan on trying to buy tickets, you have to try and do it through the official means. I absolutely understand why people are taking those risks, and I empathize with those, but it's never ever a recommended pathway. And you run the risk whenever you don't. I think you said at the start, buyer beware. You need to be cautious of that. And if you have had your ticket transferred to your membership by somebody else, you need to be so sure about how that other person has got hold of that ticket in the first place. Because if you're not, and if you have any semblance of doubt, like I've had people say, well, my friend sent it to me, and I'm like, that's fine. I'm sure you trust them implicitly. But clearly, there is a paper trail that is causing the algorithm to pick that up. And so that's led to these 332 people having their memberships initially suspended and thankfully reinstated. So, and the other part of it is obviously if you are affected by this, and if you're watching this and you're one of those 332 and you feel as though that one of the tickets that you have lost to a game has been, sadly, there's an injustice to that, please reach out to the Arsenal Fan Services, which the link you can find is on the football.london website in the description. So we move to the main part of today's show, which is obviously about the Arsenal finances. Now, Mike's going to direct me through, I know we love slideshows on the show, but Mike's going to direct me through his own slideshow. Do you want to do an opening kind of bit before we go into the slides?
Well, you killed the opening bit that I wanted to do, but
it's a serious show, my friend.
That's true. I do understand, and that's why we have our pre-interview.
What is this, Gooner's pod? No, it's not that.
No, can't be having those standards. You don't accept mediocrity. So yeah, there's really, I mean, the finances have come out. It's like Christmas and Hanukkah and Passover and Easter all rolled into one for me. I have gone through it as quickly as I can. They release it in two stages. One is kind of the PR piece that they release on the website. That's what came out a couple days ago. And Companies House finally published the actual accounts this morning. I ran through them as quickly as I could because it gives a little bit more background and color behind the numbers. Mm-hmm. The takeaway is that we have a larger loss, but much improving metrics that would lead towards us, thinking that as long as we keep the level of play that we have going on, there are brighter times ahead financially, which should, of course, lead to even brighter times on the pitch. It doesn't always work out that way, but we'll talk about some of the specifics, and we'll really just kind of break down the numbers and what they mean, and then of course, if there are answers, questions that want to be answered, I can try to take a stab at those. But as my subtitle on StreamYard here says, I am there. There's Swiss Ramble. There's Kieran Maguire, who's a friend and someone who's appeared on our pod a number of times, and then there's me way down here. So don't expect all the answers to be correct, but in a pinch, I'm available.
There you go. And we're in a pinch. Yeah. So Mike's it.
I mean, you wanted me to drag myself out of bed last night. This is the last slide, not the first slide.
It was the offer was there. So, and you nearly did, to be fair to you, but
I did. This is the final slide.
We have you with the prep, because we've obviously, since that conversation this morning, we've had the release of the full details, which we have not all the full breakdown of, but certainly we've had an inference from that, this is going to be helpful. So yeah, talk us through it, mate.
All right, this is the last slide, not the first slide. So,
for goodness sake. I thought we sorted. Oh, it's because I've got it in the wrong order. There we go. Yeah,
we did sort this, but
I'm not professional and put it back to the start. There you go.
All right, so basically this is called an income statement or a profit and loss statement, and it kind of breaks down the final numbers into a handful of different areas. And I've run this over 3 years, 2020-21. That was the kind of quote unquote final COVID season, the one where our ability to have fans in the stadium was limited. 2022, which is the year where we kind of missed out on the top four in the last couple weeks of the season. We were not in Europe at all, and our domestic cup performance, let's just say it hasn't been great over the last few years since we won the FA Cup originally. In the early days of Mikel Arteta, and then last season, which ended up with the Europa round of 16 loss to Sporting, was it?
Yeah.
And a second place finish in the Premier League. So I don't have the breakdown of the broadcasting money between domestic and European, but we have the total numbers. But the first thing to look at is match day revenues. 2022 showed us what match day baseline is when we just look at the league and a couple of cup matches potentially, but no Europe. It generally tends to be about 4 million of revenue on average per game and about 80 million for the entire season. Being back in Europe, even with just it being Europa League, has absolutely helped that. The prices are higher. There's more games, and we ended up with about 102 million of match day revenues, up from 79. Broadcasting revenues, and I'm like rolling my cursor over this like you could see that. I know you can't see my cursor on your screen, but
I can move my cursor. Where are we broadcasting revenue? There we go.
The broadcasting total for 2023 was 100 and what is that?
191
compared to 145. That is all about two things. It's about increased broadcasting revenues for the Premier League, increased by finishing second rather than fifth, and of course the inclusion of Europa League revenues for our group stage and our round of 16 tie. As you'll see in the projections for 2024, that number is going to spike again next year based on our participation in the Champions League this year. As for commercial revenues, all hail Juliet Slot, right? I mean, there's no controversy about her involvement. It's just all good. But no, seriously, between getting back into Europe, some new deals, some renegotiation and renewals of other deals, our commercial total has increased. And again, these numbers are kind of small for me to see, but
sorry, mate. I don't know if I can make it any. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. So commercials up to 169 from 141 the year before. Still lagging way behind our counterparts, and that's one area, of course, that you would expect to a certain degree, because while all of our counterparts have been regularly collecting views from people for being in the best European competitions, we have not been for many years, and that impacts what companies are willing to pay to be on our shirts, to be on our on the backgrounds of interview boards and that sort of thing. So that's a number that certainly there's still a lot of room for improvement on, and we should see better numbers. So that number is 169. Property development is nominal every year. Player trading is mostly the net profit on loan deals. So total turnover for the year is at 466, up from 371 and 328 the years before. For reference, Man City just posted a 710 million pound total turnover.
Jeez.
Again, we could talk about how they got there and where that money's coming from, what amount of it is legitimate, what amount of it is only legitimate because of all the illegitimate stuff they did in years past. United's at 641, Liverpool 587, Spurs 542, largely due to the new stadium and having some Champions League that year where we didn't. Chelsea 506 and Arsenal 467. So while the increase in turnover is great, we obviously have a lot of room to improve in relation to our peers, and should see that start to happen as teams like Chelsea and United have, had a rough couple of years compared to what we have.
Absolutely.
So that's the income side of things. The expense side of things, there's the one thing that bugs me about the reporting on the expense side is that there's one very large expense category that is not strongly broken down in the financial reports. And that's the one that I have in yellow. But wages, which we'll talk about at the end, because it's really kind of a sign of how this club has reorganized over the last couple of years, and how Arteta and Edu have handled this wages, which include staff, players, men and women, social security and pension. So this isn't just the cumulative sum of what we pay our men's team. It's a number that's considerably higher than that because of other things. 234,768 as opposed to 212 the previous year, but 244 the year before that. So this is an area where we saw kind of the cleaning house impact of getting rid of people like Ozil, Aubameyang, Kolasinac, Mustafi, all of those pain pills that we took. This is where we're seeing the benefit of that in these lower numbers.
So a team that finished second was on a wage total less than the team that finished 8th in the Premier League, is what that shows.
That is absolutely correct. And on a wage that's significantly lower than other teams that might have finished 10th last year, Chelsea, or 5th or 6th, United. How that relates to now you'd rather just have it in turnover, so that you can spend more money and try to even do better. But considering what we've done with our wage bill and how we are certainly on the rise competitively while cutting wages, that's a pretty impressive feat. And it will lead to the ability to spend more because we'll have more revenues. Amortization of player registrations, that generally is related to transfers in. That's where, buying a Declan Rice, which won't show up on this year's, it'll show up on next year's. Yeah, it's 105 million, but it's 105 million over 5 or 6 years. So the addition to the amortizations is divided by that, and it's increased by 20 million, not by 105. So, those numbers are steadily rising over the last few years from 134 to 144 to 158. And that would be expected because the last 3 summers and even a year ago, January, we made some significant investments in the team. And that's
just quickly, Rancid says these numbers for the men's team or the whole club. How do the women's impact the club's finances?
It's for the whole club. So when you look at that wage bill and you look at some of the expenses, a lot of those, not a lot of them, but a good portion of those are going towards the women's team. I read somewhere, and I can't verify this, but I read somewhere that that Arsenal's expenses for the women's team in 2022 to 23 were about 7 or 8 million pounds. So it is by far not the bulk of the expenses that are coming out either on payroll. I mean, we know that the women's players don't make as much as the men by a good margin. We know that the expenses on travel and otherwise are probably not the same. We also know that the revenues for the women's team, especially with sold out Emirates Stadium, at lower ticket prices, I believe, than the men's tickets are going to be helpful as well. But to answer Rancid's question, it's for the entire Arsenal Holdings universe, including property, including men's operations, women's operations, youth operations, and the such. So
there you go.
Then we get into the thing that everybody's talking about: impairment of player registrations.
Nicolas Pepe.
Nicolas Pepe with a dash and a sprinkle, I think, of Hector Bellerin in there. But
really? Okay.
This is basically non-recurring, unusual, or in this case, they're called exceptional items. Exceptional items can be that we've had 3 different types of exceptional items lately. One exceptional item is when you're paying a coach who you have guaranteed money owed to, and they no longer work for the club, such as sacking Unai Emery. There was 1 year left, I think, on Arsene Wenger's contract, so we had an £8 million exceptional charge for that when we hired Unai Emery, and then when we sacked Unai Emery, we had to pay him. And so, that's what most of the exceptional charges have been in the past. This one in 2023 was due to essentially having amortization costs still on the books for players like Nicola Pepe. When we bought him for 72 million pounds, we bought him at a 5-year contract, and we canceled his contract after 4 years. So that 5th year, so 72 divided by 5, about 14.4 million pounds. That's still an expense to us, even though the player isn't on our books. And so that becomes an exceptional charge or an impairment of player registrations. And so that makes up the bulk of what that 18 million pounds is. Here's where I don't really understand the logistics of what's in it, and I've highlighted it in yellow because this number is just kind of given without any explanation about exactly where it comes from or a breakdown of exactly where it comes from, and it's other operating charges. And those other operating charges have risen from 47.5 million to 74 million to 113 million. Now, I know some of those operating charges are the costs involved in putting on the business. There are costs to having a game at home, not just revenues.
Yeah,
and I believe that the revenues for game day revenues are not net of the costs of running them, the salaries of the security, the personnel that are there, the all of those things. So, that's why they were so low in 2021, because expenses were also down as a result of not having supporters in the stadium. In 2023, they're very, very high though, and I would love to see a breakdown of the things that those include, because really the difference between 74 and 133 is largely responsible for tipping us from profitability to a loss. So I can't at this stage really explain away what those things are. They most likely are Gunnersaurus's wages, I believe, as Barry has said, but I can't verify that yet. So stay tuned. I may be able to get some details on that. And frankly, once Karen and Swiss Ramble have their say on this, I would bet they have a better explanation than I do. By the way, if anyone's asking me any questions in the chat, I'm not looking at the chat right now.
The question we've got so far was, Goon Gang says, can you confirm that Pepe cost more than the entirety of our 2022 broadcasting profits estimate? Which, of course, says here for 145 million. There's these things going around at the moment suggesting Pepe's cost us 150 million in total.
Well, I mean, look, 72 in transfer fees. Wages, which were about 7 million a year for 4 years.
He did take a cut when he went to Nice, to be fair. The club were paying about 25% of that, from my understanding.
And I don't remember whether we got a loan fee for that or not, but no, I mean, we didn't spend over 100 million pounds on Nicola Pepe, but we spent damn near that.
Yeah, some people saying that we did. I don't know where that number has come from.
Plus jersey sales. No, that wouldn't have made a dent.
We had to refund people.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, that was a really bad joke. Yeah, Darren Arsenal.
The crazy thing is, you look at his numbers, the number of goals and assists he got in the time he was here. It's not that bad. It's just that he clearly did not fit into the Arteta.
No, he was terrible for the system that we had. It's as simple as that.
Terrible for the system. He didn't appear to train the way that Arteta wanted him to train, and it just wasn't a good fit. So it's a horrible transfer from that standpoint. But I wouldn't say that he's a horrible footballer. It's just that it was just it wasn't the guy that Unai Emery wanted. First of all, it certainly wasn't someone that Arteta would have wanted to inherit. And we can blame that squarely on the guy that the gerbil killed.
Yeah, so the Telegraph released an article which said that the Nicolas Pepe deal is believed to have cost Arsenal significantly more than £100 million in transfer fee and wages. So there you go. I mean, I don't know where that comes from, but
all right. So 7 million in wages a year times 4. Just forget about the loan offset and so on. That's 28 plus 72. So I mean, that's 100 right there. Who knows what else there is? I mean, Raul's bungs probably were about 20 million, but I think that comes out of the 72.
Can't say that. That's ridiculous. I'm just going to say that's Mike's opinion.
It's not even mine. I was trying to cater to the naysayers out there, but no, there is no knowledge of that.
There you go. I think that what Arsenal have done, and when you look at the transformative nature of the business that Arsenal have done regarding just the way in which we sign players now, how much we've signed them for. When we spend big, it's because we're going for a Declan Rice of this world. And I know that Kai Havertz stands as a bit of an anomaly in that. But you look at how much we spent on Ramsdale and potentially Raya, Zinchenko, Erdegaard, Tomiyasu. These players are going for around £30 million, and the impact that they've had has been ridiculously good. Even, some of the players signed under Raul Sanllehi's tenure at the club, like William Saliba and Gabriel Martinelli. These deals were still certainly very good. And I think that I'm more credited towards Francis Cajagao when he was head of recruitment and for finding those players. But the deals that we did for those players, of course, to get them through the door was really, really important. Moving to the next slide. Do you want to go to the next one?
No, we'll finish this one off because we've talked about where those operating charges come from. The total operating expenses are on the red line, and of course, each of the 3 years they've resulted in a loss, so that's shown in red. Operating profits or loss is really the truest barometer of how we're doing as a club, because it shows kind of long-term and sustainable things. It doesn't take into consideration things that can be wildly impacted by just one thing, like a player sale, for example. And, imagine you're West Ham and your financials are, okay, you're paying salaries, you're paying wages, you're doing okay. You have a European, they're champions of Europe, for God's sakes, as they like to remind us. And then all of a sudden you get a 105 million pound infusion on your books. Whether or not it's received all in 1 year, it's still counted as player profit in that 1 year. And so, those things can massive. I mean, I haven't seen West Ham's financials. I didn't look too closely at them, but I'm guessing they made a profit this year because of that and that alone. So operating profit or loss is really a better barometer of how you're doing. And you can obviously see we're going from 97 loss to 60 million loss to 55 million loss. And those numbers will shrink further because of our success of getting back into Europe and being at the top of the top few slots in the Premier League. The other items that are added in are the negligible joint venture income and expense, because Arsenal's always got their hands in a lot of different businesses, property and such. Finance charges, which are the interest charges that we pay on debt. That has risen as you'd expect it to a little bit. We've got short-term debt. We've got, of course, the Kroenkes refinanced the loan from banks at high interest rates to them at low or no interest rates. And that, when they did that, which was in 2020-21, that's why that 39 million pound finance charge is there. That was a one-time thing that has made these finance charges lower going through. Imagine what Tottenham's finance charges are with the loan they have on their stadium. Imagine what Manchester United's finance charges are, given that that club was purchased based on a ridiculous loan that's still, that they're not even paying down from the Glazers because they'd rather just pocket the money. So those kinds of finance charges are darn good compared to the other teams that we're getting. And that's where we end up with the 52 million pound pre-tax loss compared to 45 million pounds from last year. Bit higher than I had expected going in, but again, I don't really know where a lot of those operating charges are, the yellow piece.
Yeah.
And if that number was more along the lines of what it was last year, 74, 75, 80 million pound loss, we'd be talking about a loss in the single digits as opposed to 52 million pounds. So, accounting is a funny thing. Sometimes you don't even have to explain where the numbers come from.
This is why I have an accountant and why I don't do mine, because I would screw it up so badly. Badly.
And one other thing I want to mention on this slide is the profit on player sales. I mean, we know that we have both been awful at selling. We have not had the players to attract revenue. And of course, the environment of the majority of teams trying to buy players, we've tended to get squeezed on that. 12 million or 10 million pounds profit on player sales, pretty much including pretty low sales fees for Guendouzi, Torreira, Leno, and Mavropanos. The 24 million from the year before, one player, Joe Willett. The 14.8 from the 11.7 from the year before, one player, Emi Martinez. Next year, we have Balogun, Xhaka, Turner, Trusty, Holding, Mari, total of about 55 or 56 million pounds. So, I mean, right there, that number is going to be, plus anyone that we might happen to sell in June before actually these accounts go through the end of May. So yeah, that number's already set and it's going to be a lot higher. So a lot to look forward to in next year's finances. So that'll be great for, when we finish, if we finish trophy list, but we turn a profit this year. Prepare for the parade.
The classic. Yeah, the classic. Well, if Arsenal are in the Champions League, that's all Kroenke cares about. It's going to come out again. The parade we're going. Next slide.
Yeah, let's do it.
Talk us through it.
All right. So
I've got to change it. Hold on 2 seconds. There we go.
So we talked about our player costs and expenses here, and this portion just breaks down the part that's attributable to the actual staff, not the pensions and Social Security. So this is a true, accounting of what we're spending on people. The people do include players on the women's and youth. Well, Yeah, players on the women's team, the youth team. I mean, the costs for them are negligible. It does include staff, people who work at Highbury House, people who work, in the stadium. Those folks who, again, their remunerations are minimal compared to players, but it includes all of those. And frankly, from last year to this year, Arsenal increased their numbers of staff, so that will increase those costs. But when you throw it all in together, we go back to 2018, 2019. 205 million pounds. 2019 to 20 was pretty flat. 2021, it increased a bit to 212. 2021 to 22 is when we shed a lot of that salary by getting rid of some of these players, and it went down to 185. This year, contract renewals for the likes, or last year, contract renewals for the likes of Bukayo Saka, and a few others. New signings like Ben White and Ramsdale and all of that, up to 204 million pounds. So we are just about level, but a bit lower on our total staff and player costs than we were 5 years ago in 2019. Look at the people that we're paying, though.
I don't want to. I mean, it's not pretty reading at all.
I mean, if you said, okay, give me 205 million pounds, and I'm going to give you guys like Czech, Ospina. I mean, I'm not going to read through everybody, but and I'm not going to use the of the worlds that you love to say, because there aren't Socrateses of the world. There's just Socrates, but
there's loads of Socrates of the world.
I mean, our defenders,
we had 4 of them in the team.
Well, that's just Bellerin. Well, there are the Gabbies of the world, because we have like 94 of those.
Yeah, we have 17 Gabbies.
Yeah. Socrates, Koscielny, Mustafi, Holding, Monreal, Lichtsteiner, Chambers, Jenkinson, and now for the same low price of 205 million pounds or thereabouts, we've got Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko. Last year we still had Tierney. This is based on last year, not this year. Tomiyasu and White and Kivior for half a year, as well as Holding. I mean, I'll take the second deal. So again, you can see these names. The moral of this story is that while we have missed out on other revenues from not being in Europe, which is attributable to our play on the pitch, we have missed out on revenues for commercial, which we'd like to see higher. What we've done with the playing staff within essentially a level budget over the last 5 years is unbelievable. And that 205 million number will go up next year, because we have had to pay Declan Rice. We've had to pay
renewed the contracts of Saka and Saliba and Ramsdale and Gabriel and Ben White soon and Tomiyasu soon.
Exactly. I mean, the reason that we did what we did in 2020, 2021, 2022 was to allow us to keep our best players, which we weren't able to do in the Emirates years, where we sold basically our captain every single year. And to still have room to sign on new players who are going to be at high wages. Regardless of what you think about Kai Havertz, that was a big addition to our wage bill. Declan Rice is a big addition to our wage bill. And so we've been able to, those will show up on next year's finances, but will be accompanied by much, much higher revenues. So that plan is coming off perfectly. And there's just that final piece of it that needs to fall into place, which is trophies. But accountants can't control that. So.
No, I know. This is like, I'm so, Colin actually stole the words I was literally about to say. Whenever someone criticizes Edu, show them this slide. And this is what I was going to say. Like, Edu is not perfect. There's certainly been things we've not done right. That slide is, whenever you see anyone creating any content, absolutely battering how this club is run, just show them this slide. And you will understand why I and Mike and so many others have been rambling on about how we are on this pathway to being in a much, much better place.
Now, to be fair, this is about wages. It's not about transfers. And so there, I think there's some legitimacy to, we overpaid for this guy. We should have been able to sell Guendouzi for more. We should have been able to sell Pepe. We should have been able. So on the sale prices and what we've recouped from those, on the prices that we've paid for certain people. Although, I mean, if you're gonna argue about signing Havertz for 65 million, you must put in the same breath that we got Odegaard for 30 and that we got Trossard for 20, 21. I mean, you have to balance those out. You can't just take each individual one and say, was this a good deal? Was this a bad deal? We've got a freaking GoFundMe to try to pay West Ham more money for Declan Rice going on right now because of how good that 105 million is. So if you want to pick on a couple of overpaid transfer fees, my personal opinion is, put that in context of all the other players that we've gotten way lower than what they
and some people will never see it. Some people will never care. Some people will never change their minds. They will never be convinced that it's the other way.
But on staff and player costs, I mean, the plan that started 4 or 5 years ago when Wenger left and when we struck, when we swung and missed with Unai Emery and Raul, it's worked to perfection.
Yeah. If you want to walk around the house with your blindfold on, be prepared to bump into things. That's all I would say.
That's why I have all these bruises on.
Last slides just to round off this show. So this is what I'm going to call XM, Expected Mike. Tell us what the projections are looking like, mate.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, again, from a financial standpoint, and I'll put the disclaimer out there that I have to, which is that, I get more excited about success on the pitch than in the financial statements, but it's still easy to look at success on the financial statements as a harbinger of potential success on the pitch going forward if it's all handled right by the right people. Next year looks to be a pretty smashing year. So we've got this year in the purple, we've got next year to the right of that. If this year's match day revenues are any sign, we've got more home games this season that are, we've got group stage that is Europa League. I'm sorry, Champions League rather than Europa League. We've got the potential to make it beyond the round of 16, so we could end up with one more home game in the quarterfinals and hopefully one more home game in the semifinals. And those games are, each of those games, if we assume just as crude as saying £100 a ticket, 60,000 tickets, that's £6 million a game. And that doesn't take into consideration food and drink, potentially higher ticket prices, hospitality, and all of those things. So it could be £6 to £8 to £9 million per extra game that we play. That's either a Cat A game or a Europe game. We didn't do well in the cups this year, but I mean, we're gonna smash the 102. So I've estimated 115. Broadcasting, because of the inclusion of Champions League money, which just dwarfs Europa League money. I mean, the money from the group stage of the Champions League, I think, is 70 or 72 million pounds, something in that range. Whereas the entirety of the Europa League getting to the round of 16 was probably about 20 million. So my estimate for broadcasting revenues is about 245. Retail, if we're growing, we have new sponsorships that didn't reflect on last year. So, if we go from 160s to 180, property development, same thing, player trading and loans. I'm going to call it even because while we did get some loan fees for some of our players that we loaned out this year, we also have the loan fees out to Brentford for David Raya. So so I'm going to call that net neutral. Then our turnover jumps from 486 to 542, still behind the other teams, but you can only make so much up in one season, considering match day revenues have a cap to them unless we double ticket prices, which would probably cause some grumbling. There are new TV contracts that are being signed, which are going to make domestic and European numbers higher. So I could end up being way off on this, but if I'm way off, I'm pretty sure I'll be way off on the low side and not on the high side. Wage bill, which I've thrown back in Social Security and pensions to those numbers we were looking before, just a rough estimate of 234 up to 260 million, which reflects Declan Rice's wages, Kai Havertz's wages, and all of that, the re-signing and extensions that we had this year. Amortization, again, jumping because of new transfer fees. I may have been a bit low on that. That may go from about 158, maybe closer to 190. But let's just call it 175. The other operating charges, again, I throw my hands up, not necessarily knowing exactly where those are. Estimated about 100 million for that, because 113 was an all-time high this year. I'm assuming maybe some of that might go down. So 100 million pounds. That leaves us with a 7 million pound operating profit. And again, if I'm a little bit off on any of these numbers, you can see how that would swing wildly one way or the other. But then comes the one thing that we, that we know is going to be there, which is 55 million pounds profit on player sales or thereabouts, because those player sales have already happened. We know what they were sold for. So ultimately, net profit, 50 some odd million pounds after paying finance charges, after paying joint venture. That is based on what I know right now. It doesn't include what ends up happening in Europe for us from here. It doesn't include any other last minute things that could change this. And again, it's with complete blindness to what some of these numbers higher up are going to be. But
Vesman said, if we win the league or the Champions League, what type of boost could that provide?
Winning the league is actually not as lucrative as you'd think, because ultimately the prize money and the TV money for the league is gradated from one.
From second to first, it's not a massive difference. Is it?
Second to first might be 3 to 4 million pound difference at most. There isn't like you've won the league, you won 25 million pounds for the club. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Similarly to how people were like, well, Kroenke should take all of his Super Bowl winning money and spend it on players. I mean, there is no Super Bowl winning money. The players make like $30,000 each or something like that. I mean, whatever. But winning the Champions League, getting to the final, and certainly winning it, there are performance bonuses. So if we're knocked out in the round of 16, compared to if we get to a round of 8, round of 4, and to the final, that is massive, because not only do you have potentially 2 more games at home, 12, 13 million more in broadcasting and match day revenue, but you might have tens of millions of pounds, 30, 40. I mean, I think when Man City and Chelsea won the Champions Leagues over the last few years, they took home over 130 to 140 million pounds from Europe. And I'm really only budgeting in 80 in this situation. So yes, that would have a major impact. The finish in the Champions League would have a major impact relative to whether we finish first, second, third, or fourth in the Premier League. And if that happens, these numbers will be even higher. So I am projecting a switch to profitability next season, which could very well be a shift to significant profitability. What we do with that money, whether we pay back some of the loan to the Kroenkes, which I suspect we would probably do, especially if the investment in the team is not in need of spending 300 million pounds on players.
Yeah, which you'd hope by that point it's not. Right.
You hope that it's not. I mean, there certainly, you could have the ability to say, maybe we will pay an extortionate price for Osherman, if that's how we decide to go, because we project such good profits. But I think the financial look for next season is going to be a vastly different and improved situation, and you can see the signs of that already starting in this year's numbers if you look close enough.
Yeah, agreed. There was just a question from Gooner 76 who said, does profit and sustainability include the women's team, i.e. the entire club? And I said, I don't think it does, hence why when a team's punished, they don't punish the women's side as well.
This is the tough part, because, if you look back at the first slide and look at the last 3 years of losses, there's a negative 127, there's a negative 45, and there's a negative 52. Total those up, and you've got about 200 million pounds of losses over 3 years. And as
which, according to profit and sustainability, that's exceeding what they say you can do, which is meant to be 105 million.
105 million over 3 seasons. Now, that 105 does not include a number of different things. And this is where I don't have a very good, accounting or slide or spreadsheet for this, because it is all kind of behind the scenes to the public eye. But women's operations and expenses are not included. Investment in youth is not included. Investment in infrastructure is not included. Community work is not included. And there are still, in this 3-year reporting period, for the final time, it won't be the case next year, there are still some adjustments attributable to COVID. I mean, look at the match day revenues in 2021. And if those match day revenues had just been, a normal year of 80 to 100 million pounds, we would have, had a net profit, a net loss that was way, way smaller than the 127 or 107 million net profit after tax that it was. So, I would just say that the reason, there are decisions that have been made in order to stay in line with profit and sustainability. Loaning Raya rather than buying him, not being active in the transfer market in January. And it's because they know that we are close to the limits. But I think we just have to take by the fact that we were not charged, because the charges against Forest and Everton that were, the second charges against Everton and the new charges against Forest were done after they had reviewed this current year's financials, and we were not charged, and Chelsea was not charged. What happens next year is we're going to be just fine because of our profitability. Chelsea is going to be absolutely screwed unless they sell about 100+ million pounds of players, of profit on players. So they can't even sell Mudryk at a loss. That'll make it worse. They can't sell other players. They're going to have to sell Conor Gallagher. They're going to have to sell who's the guy everybody's talking about that they have to sell?
Breuer?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to sell academy products, and they're going to have to find other ways to sell players at, for a profit in order just to get out from under that. So I think they are, as I was saying last year, when everyone was like, how can they not already be?
Because it's going to catch up. It's going to catch up with them.
They had to make Europe and sell some players this year.
Yeah.
And they're not even going to make the Europa League. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, if things carry on, they won't. Of course, they're still in the FA Cup, which if they were to win, they would get Europa League qualification, of course. But I don't see that happening with both Liverpool and City still in it. In the league, there was a period where it looked like they might threaten to finish further up the table, but recent results have put pay to that. They're going to need a significant boost towards this. I mean, they're currently in 11th. Like, it's not just a case of winning games. They need teams above them to start dropping points as well. And when you've got Newcastle, Wolves, West Ham, Brighton, and Manchester United all in the way of those Europa League qualification spots, the likelihood of that is incredibly small. So Chelsea, without European football, without them not winning the League Cup, which meant they would have got qualification for the UEFA Conference League at a minimum. Even though the money in that is not exactly like amazing, you think about the difference between the Europa League and the Champions League, it's vast compared to the Europa League and the UEFA Conference League, but it would have been something. Now that they've done so poorly. And then I've seen rumors today, apparently they're going to be going in for another young Brazilian from South America for mad money. So it just, from my perspective, I think the way in which the top body seems to want to run it is like, buy really young players and try to sell them for a profit, like it's some sort of factory business. Like it's
really but he's not even doing it through like youth players that are in the youth team and loaned out like they used to do that. They're doing that with first team players on first team wages. I mean, not super high wages. A lot of these players had large transfer fees, but like 20, 30, 35K a week wages, which, okay. So that's, them sitting and waiting to play is not killing you like it would if you have a 300,000 pound a week guy on the bench. But the strategy there, I think, was done specifically to say we will break profit and sustainability rules, but but just like in baseball in America for his Dodgers,
fines are worth it, is what you're saying.
It's a luxury tax. It's like money. It's not anything else.
Fine in London if you can afford it, basically.
And I think that what's happened to Everton and Nottingham Forest should be scaring the absolute whatever out of Chelsea. And they've got problems that date back to Abramovich. With they've got similar problems coming up down the pike to what Man City is facing with kind of improperly acquired revenues, but just purely on the current financial stuff, it's not looking good for them.
Yeah, we'll see. The Manchester City side of things have been a set of court dates been set for later this year in autumn. We'll hopefully get a verdict on that next year. We'll finally get some answers to those alleged 115 financial breaches. But with Arsenal, I think the slide that we had in between this one and the last one, that is such a great representation of what this club has done under Edu, under Arteta and Josh Kroenke's guidance, and all the others that are involved. Richard Garlick, of course, involved heavily with this as well, hence why he's taking over as managing director at the start of next season. He's done an excellent job.
And if this included this season that we're currently in right now, Xhaka is off that list and replaced by Rice.
Yeah, Balogun's been sold for 35 million and not even showing on that list. So
yeah, I mean, because he really didn't play last year. But yeah, I mean, you've
profit,
so. Right. You've got Turner off that list and replaced by Raya on loan. You've got Tierney off that list and replaced by
it's Timber.
Timber. Yeah, I mean, and yes, the only reason I don't have one for the current season is because I have no clue what that 204 number will have risen to, other than just a projection. But I mean, the improvement of the squad relative to the amount that we're spending on them remains absolutely unbelievable. And I might work up a slide just to put out there that compares the squads to other teams like Chelsea and Manchester United, Manchester City, and the total squad cost. And you can look at the quality versus the amount that's being spent on it, and it's rather incredible.
Saw a message in the chat saying apparently Chelsea would reject the
I've heard that. I don't
league. I mean, I think that's just a headline twist. I think it's more about the fact that they would accept a European ban for potential punishment in a season where they qualified for the Conference League, and in a way, someone's rewording that as they're rejecting the Conference League by accepting a European ban when they qualify for that tournament. So I understand why someone's worded it that way, but I think that's more to do with what it was rather than just if they were to qualify for it, just say no, thank you. I think that would be incredibly. Yeah, I don't think that'd be a good look at all. So yeah, especially when at the moment UEFA is going through this big Champions League revamp, and you want to look good in the eyes of UEFA really as clubs. So,
which, by the way, I mean,
something we
like it or not, the way that Europa or the Champions League revamp is going, I do believe it creates more games, which will create more revenue for Arsenal. I mean, it's at the expense of the competition's integrity, maybe, but
See, I don't think
when
that
does
it
that
is
ever
personally. I the only thing I think about the Champions League's changes, if it does, is that the supposed qualification through historical merit. That is the only thing I've got an issue with the changes
Super
to the
League
Champions League. Yeah, it's Super League. Yes, is exactly that. So if that is indeed what they end up doing, which I hope that they don't. I haven't got an issue with the system. I mean, it used to be the European Cup. It used to be just the champions of the leagues in that tournament, and it changed. Now we all love it because we've got used to what it is. We'll get used to what it becomes next season and beyond. So I really haven't got many issues with the Champions League changing other than the extra couple of games that we'll play and what that might mean for fatigue and things like that. But even so, you could argue that teams probably, if they're going to tackle it, should be allowed bigger squads. That might be the way forwards, but we'll see. Mike, any final thoughts? Anything you think that you should have mentioned but haven't, or will be looking back and thinking, "Damn, I should have said that."
Well, I'm going to ask you if you want me to address Sean's question in the chat.
Yes, Sean says,
and it has to do with tickets as well,
and has more information than what I DM'd you with earlier. Can he address the ticket controversy with the US tour match? Oh, so this is basically the inflation of the prices compared to last seas's. Is this what this is?
Not only that. So here's the issue, and I know some of you will not be interested in this, but I appreciate the question coming up. And I am speaking purely on my own behalf. I'm not speaking as a representative of any potential any supporters club or of any direct communication with the club. As you know, Arsenal's coming to the States this summer to play 2, possibly 3 games. 2 that are set in stone, dates, opponents, all of that. And as in the last few years, the club essentially turns over some of the operations to promoters, AEG, TEG, whatever those promoters are, who handle everything in conjunction with Ticketmaster, who handles the ticketing. Last year, the club advocated for its supporters club to be able to have tickets that were together, that were in a traditional supporters section right behind the goal that we shoot at in the second half, and at a very reasonable price relative to the general ticket prices and all of that, and essentially handed over operations of those tickets and fulfillment of those tickets to the supporters club, which turned into a nightmare. But what it ended up with is people paying reasonable prices and ending up together in what was by and large a supporter section. This season, that did not happen.
Is that because it was a nightmare, as you described it?
No, I don't think so. I think it just was. It was just determined by the promoter, I believe, that these tickets would be sold. However, there was an agreement reached where the supporters club would get a
allocation,
a passcode that would enable them to get an allocation of tickets that was presumably described to be just like it was last year. So we could buy tickets at a discounted price that are supposed to be ring fenced into a certain area, again, behind the goal. I mean, it was either supposed to be, or the assumption was that it would be in what the stadiums and Ticketmaster's own map was calling the Arsenal section.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the Liverpool section or the Manchester United section. When the tickets went on sale, first of all, in Philadelphia Eagles season ticket holders had a passcode that enabled them to get in an hour before any other pre-sale. And unlike what we were told, they were permitted to buy tickets anywhere in the stadium.
Oh, wow.
And what you saw was the tickets in the traditional Arsenal supporter section be snapped up and snapped up and snapped up, not at a discounted price, at a regular price, but snapped up either by just generic people going or by Arsenal fans who live in Philly and have the passcode.
Yeah.
By the time 9 a.m. rolls around, we are now able to use our passcode, and the majority of the tickets in those sections are sold. The ones that are not sold are not $75 each, as we've been told, but anywhere from $300 to $360 each.
What?
Inclusive of Ticketmaster fees in that section. The $70 tickets we were told would be available
for the season ticket holders at the Philadelphia Stadium.
No. The $70 tickets were in the nosebleed 500 level section in the very top of the stadium, and those were $70 to anybody. So there was no special pricing that was given that would give you a lower price for tickets that would normally be a higher price.
Right.
And there was no ring fencing. So we have no idea essentially who now owns those tickets that are right behind the goal. They were more likely than not to be Arsenal supporters, but they're not going to be all Arsenal supporters. So there's going to be mixing of Arsenal, Liverpool. Arsenal fans could buy tickets in the Liverpool section. Liverpool fans could buy tickets in the Arsenal section. That was not supposed to happen. And what we know is that the people who did get those tickets in those sections paid triple or treble or quadruple what we were kind of indicated was going to be cost. So, and then in LA, the issue with the pre-sale being an hour earlier wasn't there, but the pricing is absolutely insane. People are paying $300, $350 per ticket to sit in like the lower levels of the stadium behind the, and if they wanted to spend $70 to $100 a ticket, they're in the nosebleeds. And it's, it is not the club's fault. It is certainly not the supporters club's fault. It is all about the greed and the lack of organization and fulfilling promises of Ticketmaster and the promoter. And it's one of these situations like the situation with people who lost their tickets through the algorithm here. The cat's out of the bag. There's nothing that can be done to put it back in, but there's a lot of bad blood and a lot of bad feelings about this.
Naturally, yeah. I mean, if you're in a position where, like, for me, pre-seasons in other countries are about giving the opportunity for fans that don't typically get to see their club play because they aren't able to go out to the UK. They can't buy a plane ticket because it's just not within their financial remit to be able to do that, which is, very common for thousands.
It's getting to
the
point where a family of four going to LA to see this preseason game.
It's been over $1,000.
Just as easily go to London.
Exactly.
If they four tickets at face value.
Yeah. That's the point.
People have always said, well, why would you travel and go to these games when you could just go to London? And, and I always promote the fact that, these tours are up. I mean, the worst 2 hours, the worst 2 hours of the tour is the game. The best parts are all the things before
when
and
you lose
after.
to Manchester United, yeah, that is the worst 2 hours.
I mean, if you soak in the atmosphere, if you go to the events, if you stay in the know, if you play the social game and you enjoy seeing people, that's the fun of these things, and that's why you go. But it's easier to say that when the tickets are $70 to $100 each rather than $360 each, which is just absolutely insane. So you think you got it bad over there, it's not so great over here. And but ultimately, these tours end up being a lot of fun. They end up being good for the team. And I know I'm a little bit biased considering I live in America, but I'm thrilled that they're coming back pretty much every year to the States. Yeah. I do feel bad for the other areas of the world that really don't get these opportunities anymore, but
No, I know, and sometimes it's that I absolutely empathise with that position. As someone who lives here in the UK, obviously, and is blessed to be able to go to Arsenal every single week, it's a privilege, and I wish that other people got the opportunity. But
speaking of which, am I going to see you Monday night?
You're not going to see me in Sheffield, but
come on, plastic.
I'm working it from home, but you'll see me at Brentford if you're there.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
Lovely stuff. Anyway, thank you to everyone that's tuned into today's show. Very much appreciate your time. As always, Mike, thank you to you for providing us that insight and all the work you've done to produce those details. I'm sure that you'll be doing some other stuff around those elsewhere and publishing it elsewhere.
And there are a lot of questions. If you guys, I mean, we're out of time to answer them, but if you want to ask any questions in the comments section, I will try to remember to go into the comments and answer as much as I can.
There you go. Yeah, sorry, we have run out of time. Otherwise, I'm going to be in the doghouse. But yeah, please do leave Mike some comments. Or, of course, you can tweet Mike at the Gooners Pods as well. And I'm sure he'll be happy to respond there. But thank you, Mike, for your time. Very much appreciate it. Very insightful stuff. And yeah, I've already told people they can find you, but feel free to do it again.
Yep. If you go to the Gooners Pod tonight, I believe we are doing a podcast at 10 p.m. to talk about the Newcastle game. I may or may not be on it, but even if I'm not, it's going to be entertaining with, I think, Owen, Jared, and Aston. Obviously not Andy.
I love that you've forgotten his name. It's been so long.
I literally don't even know who the guy is anymore. But yeah, so that'll be on at 10 p.m. on the Gooners Pod. You can go to YouTube and just search for the Gooners Pod and see all of our stuff. And there's going to be some new content coming from me pretty soon. Interesting stuff. Can't tell you where, can't tell you when, but stay tuned. We will be
Mike, the expert in ticket touting.
I was a legal ticket tout here in the States for hockey tickets. Back when our hockey team in Washington went to and won the Stanley Cup final. I made a nice little bit of money, and it's all legal over here. So
yeah, it's crazy. All right, well, thank you for listening. As Mike said, 10 o'clock, the Gooners Pods. So make sure you check it out. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already. If you haven't subscribed here, make sure that you do that. And I'll be back tomorrow with you at 8 o'clock. Oh goodness, no, he's going in the pool, isn't he? Oh, there he goes. I hope he wasn't wearing like any headphones or anything. That would be terrible. He's just realised he's checking now his pockets. Is his phone in there? Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate your time. And as always, up the Arsenal.